So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually jump into some of the general purpose tools that actually come with MyEclipse for Spring. And so we're going to focus in on these areas that are actually highlighted here in this section of the webinar. Configuration editors, content assist, bean editors, refactoring support, project validation, and dependency graphs. So let's actually jump into MyEclipse for Spring. Here's actually the project that I had previously scaffolded, but we're not going to use that right now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. And what we're looking at here, basically, this is the sandbox that comes with MyEclipse for Spring. I have MyEclipse Derby, MyEclipse Tomcat, and I can also use, there's also a TC server adapter if you use TC server in your development projects. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this server. And to start with, since we're really talking about general purpose tools here, what I'm going to do is I'm not even going to create a web project, I'm going to create a Java project. And this Java project is, we'll call it Alpha Basic. And the first thing that I want to do is be able to get this project set up for Spring. And so there's a variety of different ways to do this. I want to show you one of the most basic ways of doing it, which is to right-click on the project, go to the MyEclipse menu, and select Add Spring Capabilities. And what this particular wizard does is it's actually going to show me various versions of Spring, and I can pick which version of Spring or which version of the libraries I want to add to the current project. And then I can pick from these different packages and specify exactly what I want to add. Do I want to add the core libraries, the persistence libraries? And I can scroll down and access all of these different packages. And if you're interested in knowing exactly what these packages are comprised of, they actually are comprised of one or more Java libraries. So if I switch to the Spring 3.0 tab here and go to Spring 3.0 core libraries, I can see all the libraries that are actually included with MyEclipse for Spring. And these are libraries that I don't have to go download or go finding on the internet or copy from other projects. These are libraries that already exist within the MyEclipse for Spring workspace. And if I have any need to change these, or I want to add a library or update these libraries, for whatever reason, I can do that as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add some basic libraries. And the next thing that's going to ask me is whether or not I want to just add these libraries to my build path or whether I want to copy these libraries into my project. The benefit of adding it to the build path is that I'm not going to have duplicate libraries. The build path is actually going to be composed of the libraries that exist in my workspace. The second option really is going to copy a set of the libraries into my current project. The benefit of the first option is that the projects are going to be very small and very easy to, very small and concise and easy to share. The value of the benefit of the second option is that the projects will be able to work, independent of MyEclipse for Spring. So the next thing to do is to specify whether or not I want to create a new configuration file or if I want to use one of my existing configuration files. And since this is a new project, we'll go ahead and just create a new configuration file. And when I open this up, we'll note, yes, go ahead, Jack.
Sorry about that, Neil. While we're there, I just wanted to note for our Maven developers on the line that that same wizard can be used to go ahead and add the dependencies to your POM file as well. So if you add in Spring 3.0, it'll go ahead and update your POM file with all the dependencies for Spring, and also integrates a nice Maven editor.
Yep, absolutely. Good point. Good point. So now what I'm going to do is let's take a quick look at the project. I have the libraries that I would expect, the libraries that exist in that container, and then I also have my configuration file here. Now, I don't have any code in this project yet, so in order to really show you some of the additional tools, I need to create some code. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a quick package here, and we'll call this org alpha basic.beans. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy some classes that I created ahead of time. I'll show you what they are real quick, but I figured you guys probably don't want to sit here and watch me write a bunch of code. And what this is basically a really simple Pojo that has one attribute and has a dependency on the beta object. And then I'll show you the beta object here just a second. I'm just a little hiccup. All right, here's the alpha object. Then one attribute with a dependency on beta. Beta also has one attribute with a dependency on gamma, and then gamma just has two attributes. So I'll be using this for the rest of the examples in this section. So now what I want to do is these beans exist and this project is set up for Spring. The next thing that I need to do is to register these beans so that Spring is aware of them. So right now, although I have a Spring configuration file, the Spring part of this project has no knowledge of these beans. So that's what we're going to handle next. So I'm going to double-click on the context file, and I'm going to, in this case, for this first example, I'm going to use content assist for actually adding a definition for the first bean. So I can go ahead and invoke content assist in Eclipse, and it will show me the available elements. And then I'm going to also use Content Assist for figuring out what attributes are available for this particular element. And in this case, I will specify that it is called alpha bean. And then I'm also going to use Content Assist for specifying the class. And I'm also going to use Content Assist for actually helping me find the class. So I'm going to go org.alphabasic.beans, and now I have wired up Spring to be aware of this first Java bean. And then what I can do is I want to show you, the next thing I want to show you is the Spring Explorer, and this is a view in Eclipse that will show you the project from a Spring perspective. So in the Package Explorer, you're looking at it at the file system, or you're looking at it from a Java perspective. But the Spring Explorer allows you to view it from a Spring perspective. So if I go ahead and expand this out, I'll see that it shows me my context file, and then if I expand this out, it'll show me in an outline view any of the beans that I have registered in my context file. And what I can also do from the Spring Explorer is use some of the wizards to help me add additional beans to the context file. So I'm going to go here and right-click on the context file. Actually, I'm going to right-click on here and say that I want to create a new bean. And this bean, we'll call this the bean, and we'll use the facilities within the wizard to actually automatically find the classes that I'm looking for and to register those within the configuration file. And as you notice in the wizard, there are a lot of other options that it can help you in configuring, the definitions within the Spring context file. And then I'm also going to use the same wizard to add the third bean, which is gamma bean, and we will make that a reference to the gamma bean that I've copied into the project. And I click Finish here, and now I have all of the 3 beans registered in my context file. I'm going to go ahead and hit Save here, and when I do that, they're automatically reflected in the Spring Explorer. And then one of the other things I want to show you is the dependency graph. So I can actually right-click on this, say Open Dependency Graph, and now I have another alternative view of my Spring configurations. So here I'm looking at it from an outline view. Here I can see it from a graphical view. In this case, all I've done is register these beans. I really haven't used anything in Spring to actually manage have Spring manage those dependencies. And that's what we're actually going to do next. So I can do this from a variety of different ways. I like to use the Spring Explorer, so I'm going to go ahead and right-click on Alpha Bean and specify that I want to add a property. And first, let me switch to the configuration file here, and then let me say I want to add a property. And this property is going to be the beta property, and I'm going to add an element to the beta bean. So oops, let me make sure I spell that correctly. I click Finish. That gets automatically added to the context file, and when I hit Save and then I switch to the dependency graph, I can now start to see my bean graph develop. I can see the interdependencies between these, something that is not as easy to see by just looking at the XML file itself. Now once again, I can go ahead and use the Content Assist within here if that's what you prefer, but I really like using the wizards because it really gives me a good view of all of the available options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly add another property here for the other dependency. So this dependency is for gamma, and it's going to be a reference to the gamma bean. Do Finish, save the file, switch back to the dependency graph, and there we start to kind of see the tree. So some of the other options that exist here is I can also right-click on here and create a new data source and session factory, or I can create just a session factory or just a data source. So I'm going to really quickly show you the new data source. Here it's actually going to show me a list of all of the data sources that I currently have configured in my workspace. The MyEclipse Derby one is part of the Spring Sandbox, so it's automatically available. If I had created any other database connections, it would show up in this list as well. And it will automatically, by selecting the DB driver, it will automatically fill in all the other items. And when I click Finish, it will actually add the appropriate configuration to the Spring context file. And then if I switch back to the dependency graph, I'll see the new element in there as well. Now one of the things you'll notice is the little X that shows up on here, shows up on the context file, and also shows up in Spring Explorer. And this is an example of the Spring validation that happens, and what it's basically telling me is that this particular element is referring to a class which doesn't exist in my class path. So this is an example of how the Spring validation kicks in and really helps you find these errors that will be considerably more difficult to find at runtime when you're trying to figure out why your application isn't running. So that is the dependency graph. One of the other little cool tools in MyEclipse for Spring is the screen capture. So what you might find is you might want to take this dependency graph and include this as part of your developer documentation or send it to a colleague. So what you can do is you can actually invoke the screen capture, highlight exactly what it is that you want to capture, and then it will automatically load it up into an image editor that's included as well in MyEclipse for Spring. And from here, I can annotate it or save it as a JPEG or a bitmap or whatever I want to do, and then include it within my documentation. So that's one way for you of being able to capture these graphs so that you can use them in your documentation. One of the other things to point out is MyEclipse for Spring includes UML support. So if I want to, maybe like I said before, here I'm looking at things from the Java or file system perspective. Here I'm looking at it from a Spring perspective, but maybe I want to see it from a UML perspective. So what I can do here is basically right-click on the package and go to the MyEclipse menu and say Generate UML2 Class Diagram. And what this is going to do for me is it's going to actually reverse engineer this code. I can check off the actual source files that I want to be included in the reverse engineering. And then it's going to automatically generate a UML2 class diagram that I can use, once again, for documentation purposes, or if I want, I can continue editing it with the tools that are part of the UML editor that's included in MyEclipse for Spring. So just another example of some, yes, go ahead, Jack.
Sorry, Neil. And so just a note for our users who are interested in UML, we actually have a really nice YouTube video out there on our YouTube channel at YouTube/MyEclipse for Spring if you want more information.
Very good. So I will go ahead and close this out. The last thing I want to show you in this section of the webinar is the refactoring support. So if I go and, for example, want to rename this package, I will go ahead and specify, instead of using org, I will use com. And I'm going to go ahead and preview the changes. And as you would expect, the standard Eclipse refactoring support is going to kick in. And so I would expect it to rename my packages within my source files in that package. But one of the things that's added by MyEclipse for Spring is the ability for your Spring Bean definitions also to be updated. And I can actually expand and see which context files are going to be affected and preview the changes and then check off all the changes that I want MyEclipse for Spring to do on my behalf. So when I click OK here, in addition to the package name, the source code, I take a look at the context file, you'll see that all of the references to those packages have also been updated.